The dirty smear merchants are back at it again, this time with the most dishonest, disgusting lies against Sargon. And he's currently talking to his lawyer to see if he can pursue legal action. So let's take a look. From the Daily Mail. Now UKIP candidate who said he wouldn't even rape a Labour MP says it's okay to sexually abuse boys. Police are examining sickening statements about child abuse made by a highly controversial UKIP candidate. Carl Benjamin was formally adopted by the party as a candidate for the European elections last week, despite fury over his remarks that he wouldn't even rape a Labour MP. Now, a senior UKIP source has told the Mail on Sunday that they have passed a dossier to the Wiltshire police containing deeply offensive remarks made by Mr. Benjamin, an online vlogger who calls himself Sargon of Akkad. Ugh, vlogger? How dare they call Sargon a vlogger? He should sue them just for that. The Insider says the dossier was passed to UKIP's ruling National Executive Council last autumn, but no action was taken. It includes a YouTube broadcast in which Mr. Benjamin says, "I can be quoted as saying you can F young boys. It's actually not as controversial as you think. Depends on the child, doesn't it? The ancient Greeks were pederast. It was considered to be normal. It was mentoring." Wow! That's a lot to take in. It certainly sounds pretty damning. So I looked into it. I found most people claiming this quote was taken out of context and were pointing to two different live streams Sargon had done in the past. One was with Amos Yee in 2017, and the other was with Justicar in 2014. Now, I had trouble finding this exact quote. I just couldn't find the exact words. And there's a reason for that. This quote that the Daily Mail printed doesn't exist. Yes, the Daily Mail is so dishonest, they printed a fake quote. Now you're asking, wait a minute, Sitch, how can you prove the quote is fake? Well, let me show you. You see, the good people at the UKIP Liberalist Research Team figured out the reason you can't find this quote is because it's actually 4 different quotes stitched together. Yes, the Daily Mail printed a Frankenstein-together amalgamation of out-of-context quotes to create one monstrous, fake, libelous, defamatory quote in order to attack Carl Benjamin. So let's take a look at each piece of this fake news puzzle. I can be quoted as saying, "You can F young boys." This line comes from the Justicar livestream. They had both been talking about the unusual practice of pederasts in ancient Greek cultures, when Sargon said,
"The Romans were not big on homosexuality. The Romans were actually really fucking conservative. But the Greeks were very liberal when it came to that sort of thing. Pederasty was quite common."
Later, someone in the chat challenges Sargon's statement about Rome being anti-homosexual.
I just someone in the comments pulled me up about homosexuality in Rome. So I just want to clarify. I mean, if you look at the Wikipedia page, I should have stressed actually. It wasn't all homosexual sex. It was homosexual relationships between adult men that was frowned upon. For example, I mean, you could fuck your male slaves. You know, you could fuck young boys if they were, freed slaves or probably plebeians or something like that. But freeborn male minors, according to Wikipedia, were strictly off limits. And I imagine that the problem was that if you were going to engage in a homosexual relationship, well, one of you is going to have to be the taker, and it was the feminine role that was considered a bad thing because Rome was pretty fucking patriarchal.
So here we can see where the F young boys quote first comes up, obviously in reference to what ancient Romans did. Then, a few moments later, someone in the chat makes the joke that a person could dishonestly clip Sargon's words out of context to make it sound like he is the one supporting that.
Yeah, just because people in the comments are like, "Oh my god, you said something that might not be, no charity there. What do you guys think I'm talking about, for Christ? So no, I can be quoted saying you can fuck young boys. Okay, I'll go through some comments. How's it going, guys?
Ironic that Sargon reads a joke of someone using his words out of context, and then the joke is what's actually used out of context. So that's sentence 1. Now let's look at sentence 2. It's actually not as controversial as you think. This is from Sargon's stream with Amos Yee, where Amos said he would be in favor of lowering the age of consent to 13 or 14, to which Sargon replies that some European countries already have the age of consent at 14.
It's controversial because people have a kind of mental block in their minds when they talk about this. Because I think probably this country, we're in America at the moment, and in Britain, the age of consent is 16.
Yeah.
And if you were to say something like, well, I think it should be 14, that sounds like a hugely controversial opinion that sounds like you want adults to prey on children. But
exactly.
It's actually not as controversial as you think. For example, I think in the Netherlands, the age of consent is something like 12 or 14. It's actually surprisingly young to sort of like, English speaking sensibilities. But across the European continent, it's actually a lot lower than you would think.
Now, Sargon here is merely providing a descriptive statement of fact. He does not agree with such a change, and specifically says that he does not agree with lowering the age of consent in the UK.
The reason I think that an age of consent law at, say, 16, even at 14 I find too young, but that's only because I have cousins who are young, and I don't think at 14 they should be having sex with adults, I think it would be exploitative whether they realized it or not, because I don't think they're mature enough to really understand what they're doing.
So now we can see where the second sentence was lifted. But what about the third? Depends on the child, doesn't it? This line comes from the Justisar stream. Justisar himself, while underage, had engaged in sexual activity with adults. However, he views it not as abuse, claiming he enjoyed it. And Justisar then challenges Sargon to tell him specifically that he was too stupid to understand what he was doing at the time.
I was well under the age of 11 when I started having sex, and so what I like to do is put people on the other side of the argument. It's like, what you have to do is you have to say that someone like me, not anybody else, but me, that I was too stupid to appreciate the nature and quality of what I was doing at the time. So please convince me I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah, I think it depends on the child, really, doesn't it?
So we can see that the context of this statement was specifically about this one person. And of course, the people producing this quote out of context ignore that Carl said multiple times he does not believe the age of consent should be lowered.
The reason I like age of consent laws, I approve of them, is because they're a blanket protection for people who would get into that situation without knowing exactly what they're doing, without and being exploited by an adult who was taking advantage of the fact that this young kid was 13, 14, they're just reaching their sexual maturity, they've got all these confusing feelings, they're not too sure, and they are going to end up experimenting in ways they might not actually be comfortable with, whether they realize it.
Sure.
But I don't think doing away with age of consent laws is a healthy thing to do.
Finally, we come to the last part. The ancient Greeks were pederasts. It was considered to be normal, it was mentoring. Now this part came from the Amos Yee livestream. Let's see what Sargon actually says.
But the thing is, this is actually something that's happened many times in human history. Like the ancient Greeks practiced pederasty, and it was considered completely normal, where young boys would have relationships, but they weren't exploitative relationships. They were sexual.
Exactly.
They were also like a pair bonding, like a mentoring relationship. It was very strange, and I don't agree with any of this.
Somebody's going to misrepresent you and me and say we're going to abuse.
So someone is going to misrepresent me, trying to accurately represent your position as it being my position, because I know what people are like.
Yeah.
I personally think the age of consent laws at 16 are just fine. I think they're great. I think we should keep them like that. And I say that as a father.
So we can see that not only does Sargon say he doesn't support the practice, but he accurately predicts that someone will dishonestly take this out of context. I bet he didn't think that it would end up being the Daily Mail. So yes, the Daily Mail printed, as fact, a straight-up lie by shoving 4 different quotes from 2 different conversations spliced together with the malicious and intentionally dishonest purpose of smearing Carl Benjamin. But wait, it gets even worse. Now maybe you're wondering, how is that even possible? Well, let me show you. The article continues with yet another brazen lie. The dossier also includes a screenshot of a social media message in which Benjamin says he needs something to really trigger outrage, adding, "Do you have any underage porn or child porn? I will delete it fast so nobody gets in trouble." The unnamed recipient responds, "Dude, what the F?" Now, this is a faked direct message conversation created by this user, @RacistGoku, who also cropped a picture of another man and created another fake tweet, making it look like it was Carl that tweeted out a nude picture of himself. Which of course he didn't. So you might say, wait a minute, Sitch, how do we know this is a fake DM? How do we know that Sargon didn't randomly direct message a total stranger and ask them for child pornography? Well, the time this fake direct message was created, someone reported it to Twitter, and Sargon was banned. However, he then made a video declaring that it was fake.
In what universe is that likely to have happened, Jack?
Showing how easy it can be for a person to create a fake Twitter direct message, and when Sargon complained to Twitter about this, his account was unbanned, and the person who fabricated the DM was then banned. And the reason for that is because, as the Mueller report has shown us, Twitter can see all your direct messages. So if Carl is accusing someone of creating a fake DM, Twitter can check if it is in fact real or not. And the fact that they unbanned Carl and then turned around and banned the person who produced the fake DM shows that Twitter indeed ruled it was fake. So there you go. The Daily Mail has published 100% libelous, defamatory fake news in an attempt to smear Sargon and hurt his chances in the election. And even The Sun has now picked up the story as well. I don't know what the libel or defamation laws are in the UK, but publishing this monstrous Frankensteinian stitched-together quote as if it is a fact, and fake Twitter DMs, definitely seems like an actionable offense to me. And Sargon has said that he is now talking to a lawyer about it. And they should definitely be sued, because as I talked about in the previous Sargon video, this fake news can easily be used as a source on Wikipedia to further defame his character. I hope Sargon sues the Daily Mail and they end up having to pay the big bucks for this dishonesty. So spread this info around. We gotta fight the fake news.